And now it is my pleasure to introduce the chair of JWA's board, Prudence Steiner. Prudence. These are hard acts to follow. Lucky for me, Ruth Abrams started with a couple of stories about herself, and that gives me permission, I think, to tell a story about myself. 15 years ago, Gail Reimer, the inventor and the executive director of the Jewish Women's Archive, and whom I had never met, came to see me in Cambridge, Massachusetts, to talk about the Jewish Women's Archive. Before she came, I'd been thinking, who needs another archive? Well, as I was taking Gail's coat, she said, of course, you need to know that this is a virtual archive, online, open to everyone, at all hours of the day, all day, every day, from wherever you and a computer might be. Well, at that moment, my mind, rather like a compass needle, swung around 180 degrees, and it is still pointing at the Jewish Women's Archive. It's one of the most inventive, important, and accessible resources for women that you can possibly find. You heard Ann Lewis tell the story of the JWA and what we have available. All of these things are thanks to the diligent and imaginative effort of Gail Reimer and the team she's gathered around her. You've seen some of the results of her untiring work, and now it is an honor and a pleasure to give you her greetings. Only the voice is mine. From Gail. Let me start by saying how sorry I am not to be with you today, not to be able to greet old friends or meet those of you I haven't met before, not able to join you in celebrating our three most inspiring honorees. Between their moving words and the quality of the company and conversations at your tables, I feel certain that today's event will be one you will not forget, and that I, that's Gail, will long regret having missed. In a few minutes, our luncheon will draw to a close, appropriately, I think, with everyone joining Mary Arian in song. The closing song, which you have in your programs, is one of the late Debbie Friedman's best-known songs, and it recalls the spirit with which, following the miracle at the Sea of Reeds, Miriam the prophet led the Israelite women in celebration. We close with this song in memory of Debbie Friedman, a dear friend of the Jewish Women's Archive and of many in this room, whose early and sudden death just 2 months ago robbed the Jewish world of one of the great musical composers and educators of our time. Miriam's song beautifully mirrors the work of the Jewish Women's Archive, bringing women like the biblical Miriam, for centuries relegated to the margins of history, to the center, giving voice to the silenced women, rendering visible the invisible women. Miriam's song also extends the legacy of Jewish women's activism and leadership, which we've been celebrating today, a legacy that goes all the way back to biblical times. Ruth Abram, Lynn Scher, Kate Krusher, you are the Miriams of our generation. As the founder of a new kind of museum, a museum of social conscience and a progressive agenda, Ruth Abram has not only built an impressive and influential institution, but she's also inspired others to follow her, timbrel in hand, and found institutions that harness the power of history to create social change. Lynn Sher has been a courageous trailblazer for women internalism, all the while maintaining a deep concern for women's issues and a fierce commitment to truth, as you've heard. Not unlike the Miriam we encounter in the Exodus story, who dared to criticize her brother Moses' all-too-consuming leadership and neglect of others. And Kate Kruscher's unique response to the devastation of 9/11, taking the position of senior aide to the fire commissioner, playing a vital role in the fire department at a critical historical moment. This response brings to mind the youthful, resourceful, and wise beyond her years Miriam, who, in the early chapters of the Exodus story, conspires to protect the infant Moses, secretly standing watch as he floats down the Nile. And then, when Pharaoh's daughter discovers the abandoned child, proposing her mother, the infant Moses' mother, as the child's nursemaid. Clara Lemlich, Rose Schneiderman, Rose Pasata, and the other women you've learned a bit about at your tables today were the Miriams of an earlier age, an era marked by the horrible and tragic deaths that took place at the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory on March 25th, 1911. An era also marked by the courageous leadership of these women and others in the fight for labor reforms and workplace regulation. As the centennial of the fire was approaching, we knew that the Jewish Women's Archive must join in the commemorations and pay tribute to the many Jewish women who lost their lives in the catastrophic fire. As Lynn Sher said earlier, the women who died stand as a reminder of the deaths that had to take place before real reform came into being. They also represent the thousands of anonymous working women who have been important participants in the American social justice movement. We also knew that as we remembered the dead, we needed to celebrate and broadcast the stories of the women who, both before the fire and after it, courageously fought to improve the conditions of workers and the safety of factories. There were those who wondered about conjoining the celebration with commemoration and questioned the propriety of speaking of the Triangle Fire and celebration in the same breath. We, however, recognized that this is precisely what the Jewish Women's Archive must do. We must tell the stories that inspire and empower young women to respond creatively and effectively to the challenges of our generation's struggles for social justice. We must tell the stories that remind us of the gains won by women in workers' rights, civil rights, women's rights, and human rights, gains they struggled long and hard for, frequently against overwhelming odds. We must tell the stories that remind us that citizens like Rose Schneiderman, like Ruth Abram, like you, what you can do and to organize and lead movements for social change. We must tell these women's stories so that we can have access to that spark which, as Kate Kruscher so beautifully put it, continues to drive us all to action, because our actions do matter and can bend history in the direction of justice. As you know, events like this do not happen without much preparation. And I'm delighted to be the one who gets to do the thank yous, albeit in absentia. First, I'd like to express my deep gratitude to members of the JWA Board of Directors, all but one of whom are here today. Enthusiastic about this idea when it first came up last May, they have become ever more engaged and invested in its success as the months have gone by. The event committee, with Ann Lewis as its chair, was especially supportive. Although relatively new to the JWA board, Sue Bricker-Dorn over there has done a fantastic job chairing the development subcommittee. These women deserve your applause. And we owe a large debt to Julia Rhodes Davis and her colleagues at Production Collective, who are as passionate about women's history and social justice as we are, and as committed to excellence and attention to detail. Their patience and professionalism have made working with them a unique pleasure. It's impossible to overestimate how hard the JWA staff worked to ensure that the day would be enjoyable and, when you weren't looking, educational. Every staff member significantly contributed to the day's success, and all of them were guided and motivated by our wonderfully talented Deputy Director, Ellen Rothman. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you for carrying the torch with such grace and dedication. At Ellen's side throughout was our delightful, charming, and hard-working new Director of Development, Nancy Gunn, who hit the ground, not just running, but sprinting. Thank you, Nancy. And from Gail, lastly, a thanks to all of you who have joined us for this commemoration and celebration. With your support today and throughout the years, the Jewish Women's Archive has moved from a dream to a reality. Thank you all.